Champagne felt sticky on my skin, a grotesque parody of celebration. They raised their glasses, their laughter echoing in the cavernous nightclub, each peal a shard of ice driven into my heart. They thought they had triumphed. They believed they had finally silenced me. But as I watched them revel in their perceived victory, a cold resolve solidified within me, a promise whispered in the depths of my soul: this wasn't over. This was just the beginning, if you do absolutely anything to protect your little sister. Subscribe now. My name is Sarah, and until a few months ago, I was living the dream. Not some extravagant fairy tale dream, but a solid, satisfying reality built on hard work and ambition. I had clawed my way up from cocktail waitress to become the general manager of the Onyx, the hottest nightclub in the city. It wasn't just a job, it was my life. I poured my heart and soul into that place, transforming it from a struggling venue into a celebrity hotspot. I knew every detail, every secret, every strength and weakness of the Onyx like the back of my hand. Then came Veronica Sterling, the impeccably dressed, ice-veined wife of tech mogul Richard Sterling. She decided she wanted to be the queen of the Onyx, and she wasn't interested in sharing the throne. At first, I tried to be accommodating. I arranged exclusive tables, catered to her every whim, and even pretended to laugh at her painfully unfunny jokes. I thought I could manage her ego, keep her happy, and maintain the delicate balance of power within the club. I was wrong. Veronica saw my attempts at diplomacy as weakness. She started making increasingly outrageous demands, treating the staff with disdain, and openly criticizing my management. The atmosphere in the Onyx shifted, the vibrant energy replaced by a palpable tension. The staff, once a tight-knit family, became fractured and fearful. I tried to reason with Veronica to explain the damage she was causing, but she simply brushed me off with a condescending smile. Richard owns half this city, darling, she purred, her voice dripping with arrogance. I suggest you learn to play nice. That's when the whispers started. Subtle at first, barely audible above the pounding music, but they grew louder, more persistent, spreading like a virus through the city's elite circles. Rumors about my competence, my character, even my personal life, all carefully crafted to undermine my reputation. Lies spun from envy and malice. The whispers reached the owner of the Onyx, a man named Mr. Thompson who, while generally supportive, was also easily swayed by the opinions of those with deep pockets. He started questioning my decisions, second-guessing my strategies, and subtly hinting that perhaps it was time for a change of scenery. The final blow came swiftly and without warning. Mr. Thompson called me into his office, his face etched with discomfort. "Sarah," he began, avoiding my gaze, "I'm afraid we have to let you go." He mumbled something about restructuring and new direction, but I knew the truth. Veronica Sterling had gotten what she wanted. I left the Onyx that day with my head held high, but inside I was shattered. The club was more than just a job, it was my identity, my passion, my life's work. And she had taken it all away with a few well-placed whispers. I tried to find other work, but Veronica's influence was far-reaching. Doors that had once been open to me were now slammed shut. I was blacklisted, ostracized, reduced to a pariah in the industry I had once dominated. I was forced to take a humiliating job as a hostess at a low-rent diner, serving lukewarm coffee to truckers and tourists. Every day was a reminder of what I had lost, of the injustice I had suffered. But amidst the despair, a flicker of something else began to grow, a burning, unquenchable desire for retribution. I would not let her win. I would not let her destroy me. I would rebuild, I would rise again, and I would make her pay. The person I trusted most during that time was actually reporting back to her. The diner was a greasy spoon, the kind of place where the coffee was always burnt and the clientele smelled faintly of desperation. Each shift felt like an eternity, the clatter of plates and the drone of conversations a constant reminder of my fall from grace. I tried to ignore the pitying glances from former acquaintances, the whispers that followed me like a shadow. But it was impossible to escape the feeling of being watched, judged, reduced to nothing more than a cautionary tale. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford. Night after night, I lay awake, replaying the events that had led to my downfall, each memory a fresh wound. The Onyx, once a symbol of my success, now haunted my dreams, a glittering mirage just beyond my reach. I tossed and turned, consumed by anger, frustration, and a gnawing sense of helplessness. How could one person wield so much power? How could a lifetime of hard work be undone by a few malicious lies? The injustice of it all was a constant weight on my chest, crushing my spirit, threatening to suffocate me completely. I knew I couldn't continue like this. I had to fight back, but I didn't know how. Veronica Sterling was untouchable, surrounded by wealth and influence. Any direct confrontation would be futile, even dangerous. I needed a plan, a strategy, something that would level the playing field and expose her for who she truly was. But what? Desperate, I reached out to a few of my former colleagues at the Onyx, hoping to find someone who might be willing to help me. Most were too afraid to get involved, terrified of crossing Veronica. But one person, a bartender named Marco, agreed to meet me in secret. Marco had always been loyal, a quiet observer with a keen sense of justice. He confirmed my suspicions about Veronica's campaign against me, revealing the extent of her manipulation and the lies she had spread. He also told me something that sparked a glimmer of hope. Veronica wasn't as perfect as she appeared. She had secrets, vulnerabilities, weaknesses that she desperately tried to hide. She thinks she's untouchable, Marco said, his voice low and serious, but everyone has a breaking point. He couldn't provide me with concrete evidence, but he gave me a starting point, a direction to pursue. It was enough to reignite the fire within me, to fuel my determination to seek retribution. I started digging, discreetly, carefully, using every resource I had to uncover the truth about Veronica Sterling. I spent hours online, scouring public records, social media accounts, anything that might offer a clue to her hidden life. I contacted old acquaintances, former employees, anyone who might have dirt on her. It was a slow, painstaking process, fraught with dead ends and false leads, but I refused to give up. I knew that somewhere, buried beneath the layers of wealth and privilege, there was a crack in her armor, a vulnerability that I could exploit. And when I found it, I would be ready. The loneliness was the worst part. My friends, fearing association with a troublemaker, slowly drifted away. Even my family, while supportive, couldn't fully grasp the depth of my despair. I was alone in my fight, isolated by Veronica's web of lies. The diner became my prison, each shift a sentence in my personal hell. I found myself staring into the faces of the customers, searching for a flicker of recognition, a sign of hope. But all I saw were blank stares, indifferent eyes that reflected my own isolation. One particularly brutal evening, after enduring a barrage of insults from a rude customer, I broke down. I ran to the back of the diner, sobbing uncontrollably, convinced that I had reached my breaking point. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't continue to live like this, stripped of my dignity, reduced to a shadow of my former self. As I stood there, consumed by despair, I thought about my younger sister, Emily. Emily had always looked up to me, admired my ambition, and celebrated my successes. The thought of her seeing me like this, broken and defeated, was unbearable. I knew that I couldn't give up, not for myself, but for her. I had to fight back, not just to reclaim my own life, but to protect her from the kind of cruelty that Veronica Sterling represented. That night, I made a promise to myself. I would not rest until I had exposed Veronica's true nature and brought her down. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but I was ready. The game had just begun. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife. My own cousin, Emily, the one I'd confided in, the one I'd considered my closest confidant, was Veronica's informant. I discovered it by accident, a misplaced text message flashing on Emily's phone during a rare visit. A message from Veronica, dripping with gratitude and offering a substantial sum of money for continued updates on Sarah's pathetic progress. The air in the room seemed to thicken, the cheerful yellow walls closing in on me. I felt a wave of nausea, the betrayal so profound it momentarily stole my breath. Emily stammered, her face contorted with guilt and fear, desperately trying to explain, to justify her actions. She claimed she needed the money, that Veronica had threatened her, that she had no choice. But her words were hollow, meaningless against the crushing weight of her deception. I didn't yell, I didn't scream. I simply stared at her, a cold emptiness spreading through my soul. The bond we had shared, the years of trust and affection, shattered into a million pieces, leaving behind only shards of bitterness and regret. I asked her to leave, my voice barely a whisper. As she walked out the door, I knew that something inside me had died. The world, already bleak and unforgiving, suddenly seemed even darker, more treacherous. If I couldn't trust my own family, who could I trust? The next few weeks were a blur of despair and self-loathing. I lost my appetite, my sleep became even more erratic, and the diner felt like a suffocating tomb. I started making mistakes at work, spilling coffee, forgetting orders, earning the ire of my already impatient boss. One afternoon, after a particularly humiliating incident involving a spilled tray of greasy burgers and a very angry biker, I was fired. Standing on the curb, clutching my meager belongings in a cardboard box, I felt like I had reached the absolute bottom. I had lost everything: my career, my reputation, my friends, my family, And now, even my pathetic job at the diner. Veronica Sterling had effectively erased me from existence. The thought of her, sipping champagne and laughing at my misfortune, fueled a rage so intense it threatened to consume me. I wanted to lash out, to confront her, to make her pay for what she had done. But I knew that would be playing right into her hands. She wanted me to break, to lose control, to give her the satisfaction of seeing me completely destroyed. I couldn't let that happen. I wouldn't give her the victory. That night, I found myself standing on the edge of the city's oldest bridge, the dark water swirling below. The wind howled around me, carrying the scent of rain and decay. The city lights blurred in the distance, a mocking reminder of the vibrant life I had once known. I closed my eyes, the weight of my despair pressing down on me, urging me to let go, to simply surrender to the darkness and end it all. The thought was tempting, a siren song promising sweet release from the pain and humiliation. But then I saw Emily's face in my mind, her eyes wide with fear and regret. I remembered the promise I had made to myself to protect her from Veronica's cruelty, and I knew that I couldn't give up, not now, not ever. Giving up wasn't an option. Ending it all would only give Veronica exactly what she wanted. It would validate her actions, confirm her power, and leave Emily vulnerable to her influence. I took a deep breath, the cold air stinging my lungs. I opened my eyes, the city lights now shimmering with a new clarity. The darkness was still there, but it no longer felt overwhelming. I had stared into the abyss, and I had chosen to turn away. A spark of something hard and cold ignited within me, a burning ember of resolve. The desire for revenge was no longer a blind, irrational impulse. It was a calculated, strategic plan, meticulously crafted to dismantle Veronica Sterling's empire of lies. I would use her own weapons against her, her wealth, her influence, her carefully constructed image. I would expose her secrets, unravel her manipulations, and reveal her true nature to the world. It wouldn't be easy. It would require patience, cunning, and a willingness to embrace the darkness. But I was ready. The old Sarah, the naive, trusting, hardworking general manager of the Onyx, was gone. In her place stood a new Sarah, hardened by betrayal, fueled by rage, and determined to exact her revenge. I turned away from the bridge, the wind now at my back pushing me forward. The city lights beckoned, no longer mocking but promising. The game had changed. I was no longer the victim, I was the hunter, and Veronica Sterling was my prey. The first step was to disappear, to become someone else. To build a new identity, a new life, a new arsenal of weapons. Veronica Sterling thought she had destroyed me. She was wrong. She had created me, and she would soon regret it. The first step was erasing Sarah. I sold everything I owned, which wasn't much after the diner, and used the cash to secure a fake ID, a burner phone, and a cheap laptop. I dyed my hair black, traded my sensible shoes for combat boots, and started going by Riley. Riley was a ghost, untraceable and unburdened by the past. I found a tiny, dilapidated apartment in a forgotten corner of the city, a place where no one would look twice at a newcomer. It was there, surrounded by peeling paint and the ghosts of forgotten tenants, that I began to plot my revenge. Veronica Sterling was a creature of habit, her life a carefully choreographed performance of wealth and power. She frequented the same restaurants, attended the same galas, and surrounded herself with the same sycophantic entourage. I needed to understand her routine, her vulnerabilities, her weaknesses. I spent weeks observing her, lurking in the shadows, meticulously documenting her every move. I learned her schedule, her preferences, her pet peeves. I discovered that she had a gambling problem, a penchant for high-stakes poker games in exclusive, invitation-only clubs. I also learned that she was having an affair with a prominent politician, a married man with a squeaky clean public image. This was the ammunition I needed. My plan was multifaceted, a carefully constructed web of deceit designed to expose Veronica's true nature and bring her crashing down. First, I would target her reputation, using the affair to discredit her and undermine her influence within the city's elite circles. I anonymously sent compromising photos and details of her rendezvous with the politician to several gossip blogs and news outlets, careful to conceal my identity and use encrypted channels to avoid detection. The scandal erupted like a volcano, dominating headlines and social media feeds. Veronica's pristine image was shattered, her carefully constructed facade crumbling under the weight of public scrutiny. Next, I would expose her gambling addiction, revealing the extent of her debts and the shady characters she associated with in the underground poker scene. I gathered evidence of her gambling activities, including photographs, financial records, and witness testimonies, and leaked them to the authorities, triggering an investigation into her finances and her connections to organized crime. The investigation threatened to expose her illicit dealings and jeopardize her entire empire. But the final blow, the one that would truly destroy her, was the revelation of her role in my downfall. I had meticulously documented every instance of her manipulation, every lie she had spread, every attempt she had made to sabotage my career. I had recordings of her conversations with my cousin Emily, text messages detailing her plans, and emails outlining her strategies. This evidence was my insurance policy, the trump card I would play when the time was right. Gathering the evidence was risky. I needed access to Veronica's inner circle, people who knew her secrets and were willing to betray her. I started by befriending a former assistant of Veronica's, a young woman named Chloe who had been unceremoniously fired after a minor transgression. Chloe was bitter and resentful, eager to exact her own revenge on Veronica. She became my inside source, providing me with valuable information about Veronica's activities and access to her personal files. Through Chloe, I learned about Veronica's hidden safe, a secret compartment in her mansion that contained her most valuable possessions and incriminating documents. I knew that if I could gain access to that safe, I would have everything I needed to destroy her. But breaking into Veronica's mansion was a dangerous proposition. The house was heavily guarded, equipped with state-of-the-art security systems, and patrolled by armed guards. I needed a plan, a way to bypass the security and gain access to the safe without being detected. I spent weeks studying the blueprints of the mansion, analyzing the security systems, and mapping out the patrol routes of the guards. I discovered a blind spot in the security coverage, a small section of the property that was not monitored by cameras or sensors. It was a long shot, but it was my only chance. The night of the break-in was nerve-wracking. I dressed in black, armed myself with a lock-picking kit and a taser, and stealthily made my way to Veronica's mansion. The air was thick with anticipation, the silence broken only by the rustling of leaves and the distant sirens of the city. I slipped through the blind spot in the security coverage and made my way to the back of the house. I disabled the alarm system with a code Chloe had provided and quietly unlocked the back door. Inside, the house was dark and silent, the only sound the muffled ticking of a grandfather clock in the hallway. I navigated the labyrinthine corridors, relying on my memory of the blueprints and the faint glow of my flashlight. I finally reached Veronica's study, the room where the safe was hidden behind a false bookcase. I worked quickly, using my lock-picking skills to crack the safe. Inside, I found a treasure trove of incriminating documents, financial records, compromising photos, and letters detailing her illicit activities. I carefully copied everything onto a USB drive and replaced the originals, leaving no trace of my presence. As I made my escape, I heard a noise, a footstep in the hallway. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. Veronica was awake. I ducked behind a heavy curtain, holding my breath as she walked past the study, her silhouette visible in the moonlight. She paused for a moment, as if sensing something was amiss, then continued down the hallway. I waited until she was gone, then slipped out of the house and disappeared into the night. The USB drive was in my possession. The game was about to change. The USB drive was my Excalibur, the key to unlocking Veronica's downfall. I had everything I needed to expose her crimes and reclaim my life. But I couldn't just release the information indiscriminately. I needed to control the narrative, to ensure that the truth was revealed in a way that would maximize the impact and minimize the potential for backlash. I decided to stage a public confrontation, a carefully orchestrated event that would expose Veronica's true nature to the world. I knew she was scheduled to host a charity gala at the Onyx, a lavish affair attended by the city's elite. It was the perfect venue, the perfect audience, the perfect opportunity to deliver my final blow. I spent the next few days meticulously planning the gala takedown, coordinating with Chloe and a few other disgruntled former employees of Veronica's who were eager to see her brought to justice. We leaked rumors about financial irregularities and shady dealings to the press, creating a buzz of anticipation and suspicion around the event. I even managed to plant a hidden camera in the ballroom, capturing footage of Veronica's interactions with her guests and her inner circle. The trap was set. The night of the gala arrived, a swirling vortex of designer gowns, clinking champagne glasses, and forced smiles. I arrived disguised as a cater waiter, my face obscured by a surgical mask and my movements deliberately unobtrusive. I moved through the crowd like a ghost, observing Veronica as she worked the room, basking in the attention and admiration of her sycophants. She looked radiant, confident, completely unaware of the storm that was about to break. I made my way to the AV control room, a small, secluded space overlooking the ballroom. Inside, Chloe was waiting for me, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. Together, we prepared the final stage of our plan, uploading the incriminating evidence onto the main screen and disabling the sound system, ensuring that our message would be heard loud and clear. The tension in the room was palpable, a mixture of excitement and dread. We knew that we were playing a dangerous game, that Veronica was a powerful enemy who wouldn't hesitate to retaliate. But we were also driven by a burning desire for justice, a conviction that Veronica needed to be held accountable for her actions. We checked the equipment one last time, ensuring that everything was in place. The countdown had begun. As Veronica took the stage to deliver her opening remarks, I gave Chloe the signal. She pressed the button, and the screen behind Veronica flickered to life, displaying a montage of compromising photos and financial records. A gasp rippled through the crowd as the guests realized what was happening. Veronica froze, her face a mask of shock and disbelief. She tried to regain control, to dismiss the images as fake, but her words were drowned out by the rising tide of murmurs and accusations. I stepped out of the control room and made my way to the stage, my heart pounding in my chest. I removed my mask, revealing my face to the stunned audience. Veronica's eyes widened in recognition, her carefully constructed facade crumbling before my very eyes. I raised my hand, silencing the crowd, and began to speak, my voice clear and strong. I recounted my story, the story of how Veronica had systematically destroyed my life, how she had manipulated and betrayed me, how she had tried to erase me from existence. I presented the evidence, the recordings of her conversations with Emily, the text messages detailing her plans, the emails outlining her strategies. The audience listened in stunned silence, their faces reflecting a mixture of horror and disbelief. Veronica stood frozen on the stage, her eyes darting around the room, searching for an escape. But there was nowhere to run. The truth had been revealed. I ended my speech with a simple statement, a declaration of victory and a promise of closure. Veronica Sterling, I said, my voice ringing through the ballroom, your reign of terror is over. A wave of applause erupted from the crowd, a resounding endorsement of my words. Veronica stood on the stage, her face contorted with rage and humiliation. She lunged at me, her eyes blazing with fury, but I was ready for her. I sidestepped her attack and grabbed her arm, twisting it behind her back. Security guards rushed onto the stage and took her into custody, dragging her away as she screamed and cursed. The crowd erupted in cheers, a collective expression of relief and satisfaction. As Veronica was led away, she locked eyes with me, her face a mask of pure hatred. You haven't won, she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. This isn't over. I smiled, a cold, hard smile that reflected the darkness in my soul. Oh, Veronica, I said, it's just beginning. As she was led away, I knew that she was right. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of my revenge. What I didn't anticipate was how far she'd go when cornered. I hadn't accounted for the depths of her depravity. The next morning, I woke to a chilling message, a single image sent to my burner phone, a photo of Emily bound and gagged with a single word scrawled across her forehead in crimson. The word was checkmate. The crimson image burned into my retinas. Emily, my family. Veronica had crossed a line I didn't know existed. The gala, the exposure, it was child's play compared to this. The rage that had been simmering for months finally boiled over, consuming me. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I acted. My first call was to Chloe. I needed to know everything, every detail of Veronica's operation, her contacts, her resources, everything. Chloe, terrified but loyal, gave me what she had. It wasn't enough. I needed more. I activated every burner phone I had, scrubbing my tracks, erasing myself from the grid. Riley the ghost was dead. Now something far more dangerous was emerging. I visited old contacts, people I'd helped during my time managing the Onyx, favors I could now call in. I needed information Veronica thought was buried. The gambling debts weren't just numbers. They were owed to people who didn't appreciate being cheated. And Veronica had been cheating them for years. She thought she was untouchable, but she'd forgotten that even the most powerful people are vulnerable when their secrets are exposed to the right people. The next 48 hours were a blur of coded calls, clandestine meetings, and frantic planning. I was a woman possessed, driven by a singular goal, to rescue Emily and make Veronica pay for what she'd done. I tracked the location of the photo back to a warehouse on the outskirts of the city, a known hideout for some of the city's less reputable characters. I knew I couldn't go in alone. This wasn't a game anymore, this was war. I assembled my team, a motley crew of former employees, disgruntled acquaintances, and people who simply wanted to see justice served. We planned our assault meticulously, accounting for every contingency. I would not leave Emily in that place. The warehouse was a fortress, surrounded by barbed wire and patrolled by armed guards. We breached the perimeter under the cover of darkness, using a combination of stealth and brute force to overwhelm the security. Inside, the air was thick with the stench of decay and fear. We moved through the maze-like corridors, our weapons drawn, our senses on high alert. Finally, we found her. Emily was tied to a chair in a dimly lit room, her eyes wide with terror. I rushed to her side, cutting her bonds and pulling her into a hug. "It's okay, Em," I whispered. "I've got you." But as I untied her, I saw it. A timer strapped to her wrist, a bomb, Veronica's final, desperate act. There was no time to call for help, no time to disarm it. I had seconds. I made a choice that would haunt me forever. I grabbed Emily and ran, pushing her towards the exit, towards safety. "Go," I screamed. "Get out of here." She hesitated, her eyes filled with fear and confusion. "But what about you?" she cried. "Just go," I yelled. "I'll be right behind you." She ran. And then the world exploded. The warehouse vanished in a ball of fire and debris. The force of the blast threw me backwards, sending me crashing to the ground. Blackness. When I woke, I was surrounded by sirens and flashing lights. The warehouse was gone, reduced to rubble. Emily was safe, being tended to by paramedics. But I was different. Something had broken inside me. The news of the warehouse explosion dominated the headlines. Veronica Sterling was immediately suspected, and the authorities launched a full-scale investigation. But I didn't wait for the law. I had my own justice to deliver. I tracked Veronica to her mansion, the same mansion I had broken into weeks before. This time I didn't bother with stealth. I walked through the front door, past the stunned security guards, and found her in her study, packing a suitcase. She looked up, her eyes wide with fear. "You," she said, her voice trembling. "How?" I didn't say a word. I simply held up my phone, displaying the live feed from the hidden camera I had planted in her mansion weeks ago. It showed her, confessing everything to her lawyer: the affair, the gambling debts, the sabotage of my career, and the kidnapping of Emily. The recording went live as I stood there, broadcasted to every news outlet in the city, every social media platform, every device connected to the internet. Her empire, her reputation, her life, all collapsing in real time. Veronica's face crumpled. "No," she whispered, "this can't be happening." But it was. The police arrived, sirens blaring, and took her into custody. As they led her away, she turned to me, her eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and defeat. "You've ruined me," she hissed. "You've taken everything from me." I just smiled. She lost everything, I just smiled. In the aftermath, the truth came out. Veronica was charged with numerous crimes, including kidnapping, arson, and fraud. She was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to decades behind bars. Her empire crumbled, her wealth vanished, and her reputation was destroyed. Emily recovered, physically at least. The emotional scars would take longer to heal. As for me, I disappeared again, leaving Riley behind, shedding yet another skin. I found a small town far away from the city, a place where no one knew my name. I started a new life, a quiet life, a peaceful life. But the memories of what happened, the darkness I had embraced, would always be with me. I often wonder if it was worth it, if the revenge had truly brought me peace. The truth is, it hadn't. It had simply filled the void, temporarily. Revenge isn't sweet, it's necessary. It's a survival mechanism, a way to reclaim your power when you've been stripped of everything. But it comes at a cost I was willing to pay. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more stories of justice.